Oh, what's up, Spice Droppers? It's Charlie from Ferndale. I'm just cutting up some apples here because in the last video we made the pie crust, right? Now it's time to make that pie. So, without further ado, for America's birthday, let's get cooking. Now, before we get ahead of ourselves, we want to preheat the oven to 425 degrees Fahrenheit, and we're going to put a baking sheet on the bottom rack in there so that this baking sheet also preheats. Now we can look at the apples. Alright, I'm using Honeycrisp apples. I have 8 here that I've already peeled, and now I'm just cutting into thinnish slices. I know the standard is Granny Smith, but I just like the Honeycrisp a lot more, so just make sure you're using a crispy apple and not a soft apple like Macintosh or Gala or Gala or whatever it is. Once the apples are sliced, take a separate bowl and add flour, white sugar, cinnamon, and salt. Don't worry, I'll have the entire recipe in the description with measurements. Give that a good whisk to mix it evenly, and once it's nice and blended, we can add it to the apples. Then get your hands in there and mix everything, making sure all the apples are coated with that delicious blend of cinnamon and sugar. The reason you put flour in is to help sop up the juices from the apples and sugar so it won't be a watery mess after you're finished baking. So now we have these beautiful pie crusts we made in the last video. If you haven't watched it, there's a link in the description. I have one in a pie tin and one wrapped over my rolling pin that we'll be putting on top of the pie. So just start filling the bottom pie crust. Now look, it was at this moment that I realized my apple mixture was measured for an 11-inch pie, but my crust is only a 9-inch crust. And while you want to overstuff it because the apples do bake down, I had way too much here for this pie. But again, the correct measurements will be in the description. So the filling is in. Now I'm going to take 2 tablespoons of butter, cut it into cubes, and distribute the cubes somewhat evenly over the top of the filling. Now you'll see why I have the other crust wrapped around the rolling pin. It's super easy to just roll that out right across the top of the pie. If there's any little rips along the edges, it's okay because you can just pinch those together to fix it. And then I'm going to take some kitchen shears and cut around the edge of the pie. Just like the bottom crust in the last video, we want to leave a little extra room that we can fold over to help seal the top and bottom crust together. Pinch and fold. Pinch and fold. Pinch and I think you get it. Once it's pinched and folded all the way around, there's so many ways to give the crust some decorative character. I'm going super easy and just using the tines of a fork to make little lines all the way around, and this also helps reinforce the seal around the edges. Now I have some tin foil here that I reuse over and over as a pie tent or a pie shield. You can buy tents of different sizes, but the tin foil works just fine. What this does is stop the edges of the crust from overcooking before the center of the pie is done. A lot of people say to just put this on if the crust is getting too dark too early, but I just use it all the time because the crust almost always gets too dark too early. Just wrap it around the pie and fold it over so it's like a little tent over the edges of the crust. Just don't push it down onto the crust because you still want that hot oven air to move around in there. So we're basically ready to go. I just almost forgot to cut a few vents in the top crust. Otherwise the whole thing could burst and we don't want that mess. So now we put it in that 425 degree oven for 15 minutes before the next step. Alright, 15 minutes is over. Now I'm taking the pie out and turning the oven down to 350 Fahrenheit, and I'm just going to put an egg wash over the top. You could also do a milk wash. You could also sprinkle some sanding sugar or raw sugar on top. That's the big crystally sugar, but I don't have any of that, so the egg wash will do. This will give the pie a nice golden brown color. Throw it back in the oven for 40 to 60 minutes, and you might want to rotate it a couple times for even baking. And boom, look at that, what a beautiful pie. Unfortunately, we have to let this sit for an hour or so before cutting into it to let it cool and kind of come back together and solidify a little bit. Perfect time to like and subscribe though. Once you do that, we can try this baby. Alright, here we go. Cutting pie is not my forte, but I can tell this one shouldn't be a problem. Give myself a little wedge, grab a plate, and let's go! Alright, Spice Droppers, it is way too hot for a hat, so I apologize if you get to look at my sweaty head. But we're going to try this delicious looking pie. And I do have to say, this might be my best pie ever. Happy birthday, America! Yeah, I'm never doing store-bought again. Boom, baby, we did it again. Peace and love. I love you, Spice Droppers.